Yes. Now let's see the rules. So we have seen section 16. Now we'll see the rules which are in connection with section 16. So first is documentary requirements. So section 16 says that you have to have the invoice or the debit note or such other documents as may be notified. So these are those documents. Let's see. Documentary requirements and conditions for claiming input tax credit. The input tax credit shall be availed by a registered person, including the input service distributor. Now we'll see who is an input service distributor in detail at a later stage. Okay, on the basis of any of the following documents. So these are called as the duty paying documents or the evidence for taking SENVAT credit, input tax credit. Namely, an invoice issued by the supplier of goods or service or both in accordance with provisions of section 31. Section 31 is the invoice section. Then invoice issued in accordance with provisions of clause F of subsection 3 of section 31 subject to payment of tax. So this clause F of subsection 3 of 31 refers to reverse charge mechanism. Right there, reverse charge mechanism. So in case of reverse charge mechanism, as we have seen earlier in the last two lectures, that in case of reverse charge you get credit, okay, on the tax that you pay. But in this case you have to issue an invoice yourself, means the recipient will have to issue an invoice if the supply is received from an unregistered dealer. Means the supplier is not a registered dealer, so he cannot give me a tax invoice. So then I have to myself make a tax invoice. The recipient will have to make a tax invoice, and that tax invoice will then become the base of availing the credit. So first we'll pay tax and then we'll take credit. On whose document? Our own invoice. And if the supplier is registered, then he will give us invoice. So even though there is reverse charge mechanism, the supplier may give us an invoice, and if he gives us an invoice, then we don't have to make our own invoice. We just have to pay tax on reverse charge and then take credit. But if we are receiving the goods or service from a person who is not registered, then this clause F applies, 31(3)(f), which says that the recipient has to issue the invoice. Okay, so just mention RCM, that's enough for you to understand. So this is invoice of the actual supplier, that is in case of forward charge, and this is in case of reverse charge, clause B. Then clause C, a debit note. So these points we had already discussed in section 16 itself, invoice, debit note. I had explained to you the concept of debit note. Debit note issued by the supplier in accordance with provisions of section 34. This section 34 we are going to see later on. Then bill of entry. This I told you in the last lecture, bill of entry. This is for the integrated tax that is paid on imported goods. So in case of import, the bill of entry is the document on which the assessment is done and taxes are paid. So this bill of entry will mention how much IGST has been paid, so we can take credit of that. And input service distributor invoice or input service distributor credit note or any document issued by an input service distributor in accordance with the provisions of sub rule 1 of 54. Now this we are going to study later on, but let me explain in brief right now so that you can understand this point. The concept of input service distributor comes into picture when there is a big company having its head office somewhere, maybe in Delhi, and then it has got a lot of branches at different places across the country. Like it has a branch in Mumbai, office in Mumbai, then office in Patna, office in Kolkata, and so on and so forth. A lot of offices are there. Now what happens is that if suppose a CA who is appointed by this company to audit its accounts, when he gives his invoice, that invoice will come to the head office, right? What about the GST in this invoice? There will be GST also. Okay, now who will take credit of this GST? Who will take the input tax credit? So what this Delhi office does is it registers itself as an input service distributor, because head office is not liable to pay any tax. We don't do any business from head office. It's just a registered office. The real factories are located here. I've got one factory in Mumbai, one factory in Patna, one factory in Kolkata, and this is just the head office. So the real usage of the credit is at my factories, because I'm paying my GST at my factories. Okay, or you can say our distinct entities, different registrations. So what this head office does is it gets registered as ISD, Input Service Distributor. So there is a separate registration. One is the supplier registration, second is this ISD registration. So the head office can take registration as ISD, Input Service Distributor. And then what it does, as the name suggests, it distributes this credit amongst its units, which may have different registrations but having same PAN. So this amount which comes here will be distributed amongst the units. Okay, and how it will be distributed? By making invoice. So ISD will make its own invoices and give those invoices to the constituent units, on the basis of which these units can avail the credit. So invoice will be made by the ISD. So that is given there. So on the basis of this invoice issued by ISD or any other document, you can say, later on it can also give credit notes. So credit notes or invoice issued by ISD to these units. Okay. Now we'll discuss this concept again in much detail in the course of our lectures. In fact, in this chapter only we'll discuss. So remember 5 documents. So a question may come, a theory question may come on this point, that what are the documents on the basis of which the input tax credit can be availed? Very simple question. What are the documents on the basis of which the input tax credit can be availed? So one is the invoice in forward charge, then invoice in reverse charge, which is issued by the recipient himself, then debit note issued by the supplier, bill of entry for imported goods, and ISD invoice. Okay, simple. Then subrule 2 says that input tax credit shall be availed by a registered person only if all the applicable particulars as specified in provisions of chapter 6 are contained in the said document. All the particulars are contained. Chapter 6 means the invoice chapter. So all the details should be mentioned in the invoice, and the relevant information as contained in the said document is furnished in form GSTR 2 by such person. So this is the return that we have to file. This you will understand again in few lectures from now, called as matching concept. The supplier files GSTR 1 and the recipient files GSTR 2, so the two should match. Okay, so matching concept is there. Once they are matched, then you are getting the credit. But there is a proviso that if the said document does not contain all the specified particulars, means the invoice that is given by the supplier to me does not contain all the information, but contains the details of the amount of tax charged, description of goods or services, total value of supply of goods or service or both, GSTIN number of the supplier and the recipient, and place of supply in case of interstate supply. If it is interstate, then it should also mention the place of supply. Then input tax credit may be availed by such registered person. So invoice has to contain, say, 10-15 different types of information. Even if some is missing, but these are considered as the relevant information, the important information. If these things are there in the invoice, credit will be allowed. Okay, so what things are necessary things? These are the necessary things. Amount of tax charged, number 1. Number 2, description of the goods or service, as the case may be. Number 3, value. What is the value of the goods or service? Then the GSTIN number. This is the most important thing for cross connection. The supplier's GSTIN number and the recipient's GSTIN number both have to be mentioned, because once it is entered on the portal through this return GSTR1 and GSTR2, the matching will happen by this number. So this number is very important, the registration number. Okay, identification number, GST identification number must be mentioned, and mentioned correctly, supplier and recipient. So this is the fourth point. And place of supply, this is the fifth point. In case of interstate supply, if it is intrastate, even if you don't mention, that's fine, but if it is interstate, you have to mention the place of supply. Okay, so 5 important informations must be there. If these 5 things are there in the invoice, credit will be allowed. The no input tax credit shall be availed by a registered person in respect of any tax that has been paid in pursuance of an order, where any demand has been confirmed on account of fraud, willful misstatement or suppression of facts. Oh my God. Now what happens here, we'll see these sections also later on, section 73, section 74 in the second module in the chapter of recovery of tax, but I'll explain it in brief here. What happens is that the supplier does any kind of fraud or misstatement, willful misstatement, willfully making wrong statements, where in your invoice, or suppression of facts. He supplies us 20,000 units but mentions only 2,000 units. Okay, so in any ways he is doing fraud, okay, or willfully misstating the facts or suppressing the facts. Okay, so the GST should have been, say, 22 lakhs, but because of fraud he cuts it down to 2 lakhs. So the original invoice is given to us containing GST of only 2 lakhs. Okay, so the recipient takes credit, he avails ITC of 2 lakhs. Okay, then later on what happens is that this person is caught by the department through audit, through inquiry, through investigation. Somewhere the department comes to know that he has done the fraud, and a demand notice is issued. So this whole concept we'll study later on, the whole procedure of recovery of tax. Okay, so section 74 applies here, we'll see in detail later on. Department assesses the fraud amount and gives a demand notice. So demand notice is of 20 lakhs. So 20 lakhs more tax is recovered from this supplier. Now the question arises, can he pass on that 20 lakh to the recipient, and can the recipient take credit of that amount? So he will tell the recipient, now pay me 20 lakhs, I'll give you a debit note and you can take the credit. So anyways you are not going to incur any expense, you pay me 20 lakh and you are going to save your 20 lakh by setting off against your output liability. So he is not put at a loss, but this person will gain his 20 lakhs. So 20 lakh will go in the system, it will get passed on to the consumer. So can this be done is the main question. So 2 points. If this demand notice, means if this less payment of tax is because of these 3 reasons, fraud, willful misstatement and suppression of facts, then the rule clearly states that this 20 lakh credit cannot be passed on. No credit will be allowed to the recipient. He cannot claim ITC. Means this 20 lakh burden has to be borne by the supplier himself. It will go out of his pocket, and the recipient will not pay him 20 lakhs because he is not going to get any credit. So whose loss it is? Supplier's loss. But there is another point in this, that sometimes what happens is that we pay less tax by mistake, by genuine mistake, by some error or omission. So if this is a genuine mistake or an error, and the department recovers the additional tax from the supplier, he is allowed to pass on the credit to the recipient, and the recipient can avail the credit. Okay, recipient can avail the credit if this additional tax is because of error, omission, or a wrong statement. But if it is a willful misstatement, fraud, or suppression, then this credit cannot be passed on. Understood? Simple. So that is rule 36, and then there is rule 37 also. The registered person who has availed the input tax credit, on any inward supply of goods or services or both, but fails to pay the supplier the value of such supply along with tax. Within how many days? Within the time limit specified in the second proviso to section 16 that we had seen, 180 days, shall furnish the details of such supply, the amount of value not paid, the amount that you failed to pay, and the amount of input tax credit availed of proportionate to such amount. So see, section 16 did not mention that how much is to be reversed, but in the rule it is given the reversal will be proportionate, right? So suppose if the original bill is of 20 lakh plus GST and I pay half of it within 180 days and the half is not paid, so how much will I have to reverse? Half, not full. So proportionate reversal is there. If 70% amount is paid, 30% is remaining, we have to reverse 30% credit. Okay, not paid to supplier, and you have to mention this in form GSTR2 for the month immediately following the period of 180 days from the date of issue of the invoice. So as soon as 180 days expire, and then I will file my GSTR2, the next GSTR2, so I'll have to mention these details. So suppose 180 days period expire in the month of August, then I'll have to mention the details on in the GSTR2 which I file for the month of August and which I file by say 15th of September. Then provided that the value of supply is made without consideration as specified in schedule 1, that is what we call as the deemed supplies which are without consideration but still we consider them to be supply. So will this rule apply in those cases? Obviously not, because then you will have to reverse the credit every time because you are not going to pay, because it is free supply. So this condition that you have to pay within 180 days does not apply in case of deemed supplies of schedule 1. Okay, so it says provided that the value of supply is made without consideration in specified in schedule 1 of the act shall be deemed to have been paid. So the concept is that the value is deemed to have been paid, because anyways you don't have to pay, means you don't have to reverse the credit also. Okay, for the purpose of second proviso to subsection 2 of 16. So for the purpose of section 16 it will be deemed to have been paid, means no reversal of credit. Okay, and provided further that the value of supplies on account of any amount added in accordance with the provisions of 15(2)(b), that is amount paid by recipient on behalf of supplier. Valuation, remember valuation, we have added we add the amount which the buyer pays on behalf of supplier to anyone else. So that amount paid shall also be deemed to have been paid for the purposes of second proviso to section 16(2), means again no reversal of credit. Now why they have added this point? Because see, I'll tell you. The point is that here is the supplier. He has given some goods or services to the recipient. Okay, the original invoice amount was say 10 lakhs. So recipient plus GST of say 1.8 lakhs. This was the original invoice, so total invoice was of 11.8. Okay, the recipient pays 11.8 to the supplier, but then he pays additional amount to someone else, to another person. This amount is say 5 lakhs, he pays to other person on behalf of supplier. So then what happens in valuation? Section 15 says that if any amount is paid separately by the recipient to another person on behalf of supplier, then this amount is added here. So this amount will be added here, okay, in the value. So the value will become 15 and then GST will be calculated accordingly. So GST will also come on this 5 lakhs. Okay, so we'll have to add 5 here in invoice plus 0.9 as GST. Now the question is that to take credit, the recipient has to pay the amount, the value of the goods plus the GST to the supplier. Second proviso to section 16 says that you have to pay the value. It doesn't say pay invoice, it says value. So value is including 5 lakhs, value is 15. So now the question is the recipient paying 15 to the supplier? No, he is paying only 10 plus 1.8 and not 5 and 0.9. This amount 5.9 is not paid to the supplier. If it is not paid to the supplier, then what? Will he get the credit or will he have to reverse the credit? So why should the recipient pay to the supplier? Because he has already paid to other person. So therefore the government has said that okay, you don't have to pay this amount to the supplier because this is amount which you have already paid to the other person, and because of that it is added to value. Then this amount is not to be paid to supplier, means it is deemed to have been paid to the supplier. Okay, it is deemed to have been paid to the supplier, means no reversal of credit. Simple. Then the amount of input tax credit referred to under 1 subrule 1 shall be added to the output tax liability. This is the reversal process. It will be added to output tax liability for the month in which the details are furnished. So after 180 days expiry, we will furnish the details and then we will add that amount to that month's liability. Then registered person shall be liable to pay interest at the rate notified under subsection 1 of section 50. You write down 18% per annum. So you have to pay interest at 18% per annum. That is what is specified here in section 50. We will study section 50 later on. For the period starting from the date of availing credit. Now see, what is the period of interest? From the date of availing on such supplies till the date when the amount is added to the output tax liability, as mentioned in subrule 2, is paid. So from the date when we avail the credit to the day when we reverse the credit, from the availment till reversal. Reversal means when we pay this. Paid means it is debited to electronic credit ledger or the cash ledger. So that is the payment. So till it is debited to electronic credit ledger or the cash ledger, till this time we have to pay interest right from the date of availment. Now how will we know the date of availment? Because we have taken the credit. So whenever that credit entry would have been passed in our electronic credit ledger, like I'll explain it to you. So how did I avail? This is my electronic credit ledger. So in this I have availed credit on some bill. That bill might be bill number, means invoice number, not bill, invoice number 210 of some party. So I have taken credit of 8,000 rupees, right? Now this entry I had passed on 6th of January 2019. Then 6 months expired and you didn't pay the amount, so you have to reverse. So after 6 months means January, so February, March, April, May, June, July. So 180 days will expire somewhere in July after expiry of 180 days, and thereafter So in the month of say August I make reversal. So the debit entry is passed on 15th August is a holiday, so let's make it 16th August. 16th August 2019 we reverse this credit. I'm debiting the amount, and suppose I have got the balance also, so I'm debiting the amount. So interest will be charged from here to here. This interest will be charged at the rate of 18% per annum on 8,000 rupees. So you first calculate the number of days, then you calculate interest at 18% per annum. So how will you calculate 8,000 into 18% into this duration, number of days, divided by 365. So you will get the interest. This interest amount, whatever it comes to, you can calculate X amount, will have to be also paid. Okay, but remember, the interest cannot be debited to electronic credit ledger. You cannot use this is the ITC basically. You cannot use ITC to pay interest. Interest will have to be debited to your electronic cash ledger. It has to be paid in cash. So 8,000 can be debited to credit ledger if there is a balance. If no balance, then cash. So 8,000 can be paid out of both credit ledger or cash ledger. But this interest amount will have to be paid only through cash ledger. So this amount will then be debited to electronic cash ledger. Okay, good. So this is the calculation of interest. Then the time limit specified under subsection 4 of 16 shall not apply to a claim for re-availing of any credit in accordance with the provisions of this act or the provision of this chapter that has been reversed earlier. Time limit prescribed under 16(4) means that return of September. Remember, we had seen in the last lecture. From the for the next year, the maximum time for availing credit is the due date of the return of September or the annual return, whichever is earlier. The actual filing date of annual return, whichever is earlier, right? But that limit is not applicable for re-availment of credit. Means, if this is the financial year of invoice in which the invoice had been raised, so the maximum due date will be DD of September return or filing of annual return, whichever is earlier. Okay, but what happens is that suppose here is the invoice and here is that 180 days period. So if I don't pay this invoice within 180 days, I'll have to reverse the credit. After reversal, if I pay the amount to the supplier any time thereafter, I can re-avail the credit. That is the point. You can re-avail the credit if you make the payment after 180 days. Like in the example in the last lecture, I had taken 241st day. If you pay the amount on 241st day, you can re-avail the credit. But what if I pay this amount after expiry of this date, the maximum date by which I can take credit? So if I make this payment after these dates, then what? Can I take the credit? So answer is yes. Because of this, sub-rule 4 specifically says that the time limit of 16(4), that is this, does not apply for re-availing the credit. So this time applies only for initial credit, not for re-availment of credit. So if I have reversed the credit and then I have to re-avail it, I can re-avail any time in future. Any time in future. Whenever I'll make payment to supplier, I can re-avail the credit. Okay. So all these points are very technical in nature. Huh? You have to remember every bit of it, because question will be asked on any single point.